I'm sitting in Copenhagen. Sorry?
Lennart, I just started your recording for you.
Thank you. I'll start over again. I don't know, I can see here on my overview that people are still coming into this room. I'm sitting in Copenhagen right now, and it's 4 p.m. and I'm very happy and honored to have been invited to give a keynote at this Library 2.011 conference. I'm very impressed by the huge work that the organizers of the conference have done to make this conference possible using this virtual conference platform. I'm also very happy that we have Steve Hargadon as moderator of this session. He's co-chair of the conference. After my keynote speech, there will be time for questions and comments. I also want to say that this session is recorded, so it will be available also for those in time zones sleeping right now. And the PowerPoints is available if you go up in the menu and click on File, Save, and then choose Whiteboard. And I just tried it before, and I can save it as a PDF file that you can look into afterwards. I think there is a few slides here I have to run through. There is the recording, and Steve just said to me that the recording was started, so thank you, Steve. And here there is the special thanks to all the sponsors making this conference possible. And also I also want to say thanks to Sandy Hirsch and the San Jose State University for arranging this conference. Well, let's see, there was, yes, this one. I think what is supposed to be done here is to click on the star icon at the left and then put into where you are situated over the world. So if you could please use some seconds on doing that. Could you please put in that star up at the left and put that into the map to show where you are situated right now.
So I've given everybody whiteboard permissions. And to indicate where you are on the map, click on the star to the left, and then click on the map.
Okay, now the stars are popping up. Oh, this is really interesting to see. Okay, some early people in America being up early on the West Coast, and also in the Pacific being even more early. You can see there is one in Europe so far, and wow, Mongolia, and down there in the Southeast Asia. Wow, it's just really fascinating to see. Okay, Australia, that's coming up now. That's in the middle of the night. I saw on, I think it's 2 a.m. in Sydney right now, as far as I could see on the world clock map. But welcome everyone to this session. I can see we're about 85 right now. I think I will continue because I would also like to have time for questions and comments afterwards. I don't know if people can go in and put in these stars also during or afterwards. But I will continue now. But thank you very much. It's very interesting to see where you are all situated. This was my first slide, and this presentation will be about participatory libraries as enabling spaces for creative practices. And I will tell you in a few seconds what that's all about. But first, a brief background about myself. I'm Associate Professor at the Royal School of Library and Information Science in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm Swedish, but I have lived in the last 32 years in Denmark. My research is about how mixed physical and digital information spaces may support creative user practices like user participation and exploratory user behavior, including serendipity, that is, interesting but unplanned findings. At the Royal School in Copenhagen, I'm teaching media theory, participatory media, that includes Web 2.0 and Library 2.0. And I also teach users' information behavior and interaction design. In my research, I'm especially interested in how well different physical and digital interfaces allow and enable users to leave behavioral traces and to find behavioral traces from other users. By walking in the grass in this park, visitors have left traces that have been aggregated into paths functioning as shortcuts across the park, like this one. I hope you can see this pointer that visitors in the park have made this path, making a shortcut over the park.
Lennart, you need to click and hold down the mouse for the indicator to show.
Okay.
And do you want to use the second icon down? There you go. We can see it now.
Yeah, here. Now this is new technology for me, perhaps as for most of you. So this was the path done by the visitors by walking over the grass, and these are aggregated into a path, allowing other people to see and to follow this path. The grass in the park makes it easy for users to create a visible path that can be easily found by other users of the park. In this keynote, I will look closer at how libraries may provide similar affordances, that is, usage potentials, for users to leave traces of their activities that may guide other users' activities. I see 2.0 more about changing attitudes than about changing technology. In this way, I see 2.0 as about providing more possibilities for creative user practices, including leaving and finding behavioral traces in a given space or interface. And that space and interface can be physical, can be digital, or it can be mixed, physical and digital. And I will show examples of all these different interfaces. I will also show you examples of users' behavioral traces in libraries in a few minutes. In line with the previous slide, I see the 2.0 concept as dealing with how libraries can play a more important role in users' everyday life creativity. This is a picture from a Danish library having a kind of sandbox, without sand, but with books in, and with holes in the plexiglass surface, opening up for new ways of stimulating curiosity and social interaction between the users. . Usually focus is on web-based solutions when talking about Library 2.0, but I think physical libraries also are interesting spaces for active user participation that may supplement web-based solutions. Thus, the main aim of this keynote is to draw more attention to that also physical libraries can function as platforms for active user participation, including user-to-user mediation. Part of this aim is to point to that this can be done in quite low-tech and ready-at-hand ways, perhaps not always thought of as user participation. I will especially look into how libraries may provide platforms that allow users to easily create, store, share, find, and learn, or what could be called the life cycle of creative user practices. An important point here is that low-scale, everyday life creativity and user participation is also okay. Not all users need to be super contributors. In this context, I will present a framework, a holistic framework, how libraries can be seen as consisting of human, physical, and digital parts, functioning as an integrated whole, supporting user participation and interaction. I will show you low-tech, everyday examples of users leaving and finding behavioral traces, guiding social navigation, and everyday creativity in libraries. And I will also show some high-tech examples with mobile, ambient, and location-based technologies that may support user participation and social navigation. In this context, barriers for user participation, I will address them, as well as talk about how users' participatory literacies, that is, competences, can be supported. Why is it interesting to involve users' activities and skills in the mediation of information resources in libraries? A possible answer could be that it may revitalize libraries as social platforms for knowledge sharing that can circulate more information resources among users. It may thus create more engaging, inspiring, and playful library spaces. And more involved and engaged users may feel more ownership and interest in the library, and thus overcome possible barriers for participation and develop useful participatory literacies, competences. First, I want to explain what I mean with behavioral traces. This is a web page from LibraryThing I think many of you already know, a social website for user-to-user mediation, dealing with showing and sharing private book collections. This web page contains many examples of users' behavioral traces, that is, marks or traces of user activities that may guide other users to find and use information resources. Tags, ratings, user statistics are examples of such behavioral traces that can be found and used by other users. I see LibraryThing as a best practice example of a participatory library platform functioning as an enabling space for creative user practices. Digital functionalities can be embedded in physical settings and enable creative user practices in participatory libraries. This is a picture from a Danish library with user-generated stories on postcards containing small chips. The children and teenagers can use this special phone both to record a new story on a postcard and to listen to a story already recorded by other users. This picture thus also shows a participatory setting enabling creative user practices, including leaving and finding behavioral traces. Low-tech, physical, information spaces can also allow users to leave and to follow behavioral traces, like in this example with left behind books that can be serendipitously found and used by other users in a kind of indirect social navigation. My point here is that this picture shows a Library 2.0 setting in a physical library. I'm very interested in how indirect user-to-user mediation and social navigation can occur in physical libraries in quite simple, low-tech, ready-at-hand, and serendipitous ways, like in these examples, perhaps not always thought of as acts of user participation, user-to-user mediation, or social navigation. If you don't know the word serendipity, it means unplanned but interesting findings. And on participatory platforms with a lot of user participation, there are a lot of possibilities for serendipity. And in my research, I've spent many years now on different aspects of serendipity, how you stimulate it, both in physical and digital information spaces. This is another example of behavioral traces and indirect user-to-user mediation in physical libraries. Tabs with smileys and ratings attached by users to books they like or dislike at the main public library in Copenhagen. Again, this library functions as an enabling space for creative user practices. And this is an example of user-to-user mediation with obvious parallels to tagging and rating in library online catalogs or on social websites like LibraryThing I showed you just before. So when interacting with information spaces like the web or libraries, users may leave behavioral traces, that is, marks or traces of their activities, in acts of indirect user-to-user mediation that may guide other users to find and use information resources. In this keynote, I focus on indirect user-to-user mediation. Of course, users can also take part in direct user-to-user mediation, like when they talk or chat directly to each other in the library, perhaps exchanging suggestions about interesting library resources. Social navigation is closely connected to user-to-user mediation. Paul Dorrish, a key researcher on social navigation, describes it as moving through an information space and exploiting the activities and orientations of others in that space. That is, users' activities are guided by the other users' activities, mediated in some way between users in a given information space. In other words, user-to-user mediation provides communicative cues, including behavioral traces that may guide social navigation, like in the example with left behind books on a table I showed you before. Library 2.0, also known as participatory libraries, can, as stated by Holmberg and his colleagues, be defined as, quote, a changing interaction between users and libraries in a new culture of participation, catalyzed by social web technologies. I really like this definition, and I think this also points to that this catalyzation from the web technologies now also can help us to look at physical libraries in new ways. We can include features from digital spaces also into physical spaces. In this keynote speech, I point to how an essential part of participatory libraries is to provide both physical and digital platforms for user-to-user mediation and social navigation, platforms for leaving and following behavioral traces. That is, platforms for trace leavers and trace finders. I'm using this model for discussing human information behavior, also in a participatory library setting. Human information behavior can be seen as consisting of 5 main facets dealing with how humans create, store, share, find, and learn when handling different kinds of informational content. Participatory libraries provide more possibilities for users to take active part in all aspects of managing information, as shown in this life cycle model. The order of the 5 facets in this life cycle should not be understood strictly linearly, as different types of information behavior can occur in different order in different informational processes. Here is a simplified version of the model. I have deliberately chosen short, everyday words: create, store, share, find, learn. Because in our everyday lives, all of us, in one way or another, create, store, share, find, learn when handling different kinds of informational content in different information spaces, for example in libraries or museums, etc. As shown here, traditional libraries mainly provide affordances for users to participate actively in the 2 facets, find and learn, whereas truly participatory libraries are designed to provide more affordances, that is, usage potentials, for users to participate actively in all 5 main behavioral facets in the model. That is, users can leave behavioral traces, that is, create, store, share, as well as follow such traces, find, learn in the library. In all the examples shown before, users can create, store, share, find, and learn when handling informational content, while interacting with the different information spaces and interfaces. I'm using this model to discuss how participatory libraries can be seen as interfaces integrating human, physical, and digital information resources. In the middle of the model is the library user, creating, storing, sharing, finding, and learning when interacting with the library. The model shows the participatory library as interfaces comprising the totality of all contact surfaces, the blue double arrows, and mediation flows, red single arrows, between users and human, physical, and digital resources in the library. The interfaces thus comprises all affordances, usage potentials for user participation and interaction in the whole library, and not only such features in the digital parts of the library. In the model, users are seen as important co-creators and resources in an architecture of participation. Here it's important that users develop participatory literacies, competences, to take active part by creating, storing, sharing, finding, and learning. I will return to the issue of participatory literacies later on in this keynote. In my approach, I see libraries as enabling spaces, multi-purpose spaces, enabling many different kinds of activities and mediation flows across human, physical, and digital resources and interfaces. More specifically, I see the richness of different human, physical, and digital information resources in the library as an integrated whole, as supplementary and supportive parts for one another. In my research, I'm very interested in strengths and weaknesses of physical information spaces compared to digital information spaces and how they may supplement each other. In the middle of our understandable fascination of digital solutions, we may forget the strength and thus importance of physical library spaces, also in relation to involving users in Library 2.0 approaches. My point here is that only in physical libraries users can be in direct, close encounter with human and physical information resources, face-to-face, tangible, interactively. We use our bodies, mobility and senses when interacting with physical libraries, and we use our spatial sense and tactile senses to find materials and assess relevance. For example, it's important for many users to be able to touch materials in order to assess their relevance. I'm not outruling digital libraries. I just say that they supplement physical libraries and vice versa. I showed you this example before of how physical and digital affordances, usage potential, can be mixed in libraries. In the next couple of slides, I will show more examples of how physical and digital library interfaces can be bridged and mixed. Mobile, ambient, and location-based technologies may provide new augmented affordances, that is, new usage potentials for user-to-user mediation and social navigation by leaving and finding digital behavioral traces in physical spaces. In a physical Library 2.0 setting, it would be interesting to make use of mobile phones with special location-based software like RFID, that is, radio frequency ID, or 2D barcodes that can track and show tags, ratings, reviews, and other behavioral traces, digitally attached by other users to physical information resources in the physical library. Companies like Lennart already provide similar affordances for augmenting, that is, expanding physical spaces with digital informational layers as applications for smartphones. It would be interesting to integrate similar applications in libraries to facilitate user-to-user mediation and social navigation. This is a mock-up illustration I've made of how such an application could look like. It could be used to track, read, and create user-generated ratings, user statistics, etc. on information resources like this comic book. Such mobile applications would open for new ways that users can take part in all aspects of the life cycle model I showed before by creating, storing, sharing, finding and learning when interacting with a library. Finally, a last example of bridging digital and physical information spaces. Ambient technologies, also called calm technologies, can use visual cues, sound, and other sensory modes to aggregated and anonymized behavioral patterns. Such playful and curiosity-teasing installations could stimulate user-to-user mediation and social navigation, perhaps giving users ideas of what to do or where to go in the library. For example, dynamic displays with how many users are in different library sections at a given time as tracked by sensors and counters. Another example, fountains with a height of water representing how many materials have been borrowed so far during a day. I've taken the picture at the right from a company wanting to show the different exchange currency rates between the yen, the euro, and the American dollar. The examples I've shown you here can only capture a small fraction of how new technologies can stimulate and support user-to-user mediation and social navigation in libraries. In the years to come, it will be interesting to see how new possibilities for user-to-user mediation and social navigation in physical libraries can be combined and integrated with already existing ready-at-hand and low-tech possibilities, like the examples I shown before in this talk. Having said all these things about how libraries may enable user participation in both low-tech and high-tech ways, using both physical and digital and mixed approaches, I think it's appropriate to also mention possible barriers of participation. Many times, participatory projects in libraries fade out as users and staff don't take part very actively. In this list, I've collected some possible barriers for participation and divided them into technical, cognitive, and social-cultural barriers. I will not go into details with all the barriers. In my experience, especially the cognitive barriers dealing with too little time and fear of overload are important. Social-cultural barriers can deal with no sense of ownership. People thinking, what's in it for me? Or that the platform doesn't make it clear why contributions are helpful. What's in it for others? But perhaps the most crucial barrier, I think, deal with the everyday sociocultural fear of making mistakes and looking silly. I think here it's important that libraries try to signal that mistakes are okay, that you can have sandboxes where people can experiment and try things out. I think also important that libraries signal that low-scale contributions are also okay. In my keynote, I've pointed to how user participation can also be in indirect ways, not always considered as user participation, but as a kind of spin-off and traces from other activities, like the example with the left-behind books on the table. Of course, there is a limit when too many traces may become too messy, or there is too much overload, and you need some tidying up. But the ambient and mobile technology I just showed you may also be used in libraries to map and track resources so they can always be found wherever they are placed and moved around, also by users in the library. Nina Simon, she is a Museum 2.0 visionary located in Santa Cruz, California. She's written a brilliant book, full text available online. I've written the URLs below. It's a book about the participatory museum, and it contains loads of inspiring stuff also for librarians. In the book, it's used the ladder at the left. It's from Forrester, an American technology and market research company that has made this participation ladder with different levels of user participation, ranging from inactives, spectators, joiners, collectors, critics, conversationalists, and creators. Nina Simon uses Forrester's participation ladder in order to discuss that small-scale participation is also okay. As she says, some people are drawn to create, but many more prefer to participate in other ways by critiquing, organizing, and spectating social content. And some people will never choose to upload content to the web, no matter how easy it is. Fortunately, there are other participatory options for them as well. In the book, Nina Simon gives a lot of inspiring low-tech examples of how to enable users to contribute in very easy ways. Here is a more detailed view of the participation ladder. As I said at the start of this keynote, These PowerPoints is also available if you go up in the menu, click File, and then Save, and then Whiteboard, and you can save it as a PDF file, so you can look into these slides later on if you wish. In my research, I'm very much inspired by Henry Jenkins, professor at the University of Southern California, Annenberg School of Communication. In his and his colleagues' white paper report from 2006, they define participatory culture very much in line with Nina Simon as a culture with relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement, with strong support for creating and sharing one's creations with others, with some type of informal mentorship whereby what is known by the most experienced is passed along to novices, where members believe that their contributions matter, and not least where members feel some degree of social connection with one another. At least they care what other people think about what they have created. I think all these aspects are also important if you want to enable and support user participation in libraries. Henry Jenkins and his colleagues have made this list of new literacies, competences that could be used to train young people to be able to grasp and use all the new possibilities on the many participatory platforms. I think these new literacies are also important in a participatory literary setting. I will not go through all the bullets, just point to that I find it interesting that also creative competences like play are in focus here. Because information literacies in libraries have traditionally dealt with how library users can be more effective and rational in their behavior. This is of course important, but if libraries also support more creative user competences, trying to stimulate users to be more playful and experimenting in their interaction with physical and digital library interfaces, I think this would stimulate a higher level of user participation. In order to make room for questions and comments, I will end this keynote now with some concluding remarks. In my keynote speech, I've pointed both to low-tech and high-tech approaches to participatory libraries as enabling spaces for creative user practices. Mixing and bridging physical and digital interfaces have rich potentials for further development that may create more engaging, playful and open-minded library spaces, providing more affordances, usage potentials for creative user practices. This is a challenge for traditional library thinking. Among several things, it will require new ways of sharing quality control and presenting navigational overviews. And in this context, it's important to address issues of privacy and information overload when handling behavioral traces. Last but not least, it's essential that libraries support users to develop participatory literacies, competences in all facets of the presented life cycle model, supporting users to actively create, store, share, find and learn when handling informational content in the library. And I'm working on how the proposed new media literacies from Henry Jenkins can be integrated in this framework. If some of you should have become interested in reading more, here are 3 papers I've written that can give you more details. And again, if you're interested to have access to these slides, go up in the menu, click File, click Save afterwards, and then Whiteboard. And then you can save, for example, this whole presentation as a PDF files before you leave this session. Finally, I want to say that, of course, libraries have always been enabling spaces for creative practices. I found this picture from 1566 by Giuseppe Archimboldo with the librarian. So, during all ages, libraries has been spaces where you could inspire and spread ideas between people. So, thank you very much for your attention. And now there is time for comment and questions. And I will also stop this session in due time so you can leave and go on to other sessions. And if you had some comments or questions during this presentation, please forward them again, because I have not been able to follow all the traffic during this presentation. But let's see about comments coming up right now. Let's see if I can overview this. It's a new platform.
So if you've raised your hand to ask Lennart a question, you can keep your hand up and we'll give you the microphone. Otherwise, you can put a question in the chat form and he'll answer them as soon as they go up.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for helping in this session and for helping in this questions and answers. So let's see if I can watch up here if there are some hands up for...
Michelle, I've given you microphone privilege if you'd like to take the mic and ask a question.
Yes, please.
Maybe you were meaning to clap, Michelle, but if you wanted to ask a question, just put her hand out. So I think she was just clapping for you.
And Steve, can you please help me to have an overview, because there are 105 participants right now, so it's quite difficult to overview all people. Are there some questions or comments you would like to share?
I'm actually not seeing any comments in the chat. If you've missed that question in the chat, please feel free to post it again. But it looks as though you may not actually have any questions at this point.
Okay.
Here's one from Peggy.
Okay, let's hear. Will that be on chat or will it be on...
It's in the chat. Peggy's asking,
microphone.
what are the best strategies for traditional libraries to begin making this shift?
I think the main issue here is that, as I pointed to, there is a lot of activities already in libraries, in physical libraries, in traditional libraries, that can be looked at as this user participation. It could be the left behind books at tables. It could be one of my favorite examples is by the book trolleys with books that people have handed into the libraries, and this book trolleys, people go and look and see what other people have been borrowing and getting new ideas. So I think a main issue here is actually being more aware, and perhaps also being more aware to allow these activities to go on, and perhaps not always tidying up too quickly in libraries. Yes, I hope that could be an answer for your question. Other questions?
So I'm sorry, I was helping in another session, Lennart, but there was a question about from Diane about what audio device children use for the postcards.
It was the picture I had with the young boys having this kind of Donald Duck telephone with the postcards. In those postcards there were chips. It was with RFID chips that could be registered by the phone, so the kids could hear each other's stories on the postcards, and they could use this telephone as well in order to record stories on the postcards. Yes. Other questions or comments?
I'm not seeing any. Here's one from Sandra. How can librarians teach or facilitate the development of participatory skills in our users?
I think by having courses, instructions in the libraries. Also, I've seen many libraries having, for example, in the with the physical tags, people could put into physical books. There perhaps was a lack of instructions out by the shelves in order to help people find out, okay, they saw these tags on the books, but how could they add tags themselves? So I think a good way of trying to help users develop participatory literacy is for the first allowing them to have some kind of sandboxes, perhaps experimental settings where they can try things out. Because as I said before, I think one of the biggest barriers for user participation is that people are afraid of looking silly, afraid of making mistakes. So if you can kind of having some areas where people can experiment, both in physical areas and in digital areas, where they can experiment with these settings. And I also think the more instructions you have, both online and in the physical spaces, showing people how to do things when they are in what you could call the opportune moment. When are they motivated to actually to contribute? And that could be when they are standing at the shelf, seeing this kind of tab, physical tab in the physical book, and there could be some kind of instruction or leaflet people could take with them. Perhaps take with them at home, and then they could read through in more relaxed ways. I can see there's a lot of action going on in this chat, so it's really interesting because
there's action, but I don't think there's another question yet.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Discussion here about Facebook.
Okay, what is the question?
I don't think it's actually a question, but people are just making comments about Facebook. Elfin says, I'd like to use Facebook as an announcement page to share latest news with pupils. However, it will involve the information privacy issue, especially not many parents agree with Facebook.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because, as also mentioned before, privacy issues, I think they should be addressed more because I think that can also be a very tough barrier for participation if people are insecure that their activities, that people can see who made the behavioral trace. So if people, if they don't want to be to be seen. They could also be anonymous when they are sharing things with each other. I think that's very important in order to stimulate more user participation. Yeah. Are there comments or questions? Can you see any, Steve, are you in the session?
Yes, I'm sorry. I missed your point of different rooms. I apologize. So Lucian asks, do you think curation is important in library in the 21st century education?
Sorry, once again, because I couldn't hear that very clear.
Sorry. Do you think curation is important in the library in the 21st century?
Curation?
Curation, yes.
Curation, yes. Okay, curation. Curation meaning that that the library is kind of having an opinion about what should be mediated, or how should curation.
Curation is a phrase being used in English to describe the process of one person watching a lot of social media and distilling it down.
Okay, I can see that. I think libraries as such is very much about curation. It's all the time about selecting stuff and displaying it, making it available and stimulating other people. And if you can even have more curation, that means distillation of things. And I think every time, for example, just behavioral traits with left behind books on a table, that can be seen as a curation. It's a kind of, some people had this activity and then they want, or it could be intended or non-intended, sharing it with other people. But I think librarians as staff has an important role in still sharing, having more overview of the different information resources and trying to display and mediate them to the users. And I also think knowledgeable users can help each other in order to have better access. For example, when I stand at the library here in Copenhagen, I'm very interested in jazz music, and I'm standing there looking through jazz CDs. I very often get suggestions from other users standing next to me. And I think that's also a kind of curation where people encourage and suggest good information resources to each other. So yes, curation is important still in libraries.
I think many people are going to really like your answer that libraries are curation. Okay, there was a question about RFID here, and it was, where can we learn more about using RDIF chips for personal reviews and ratings?
Yes, again, it was quite unclear. RFID for what?
The question was, where can we learn more about using RFID chips for personal reviews and ratings?
I haven't seen very much about having the RFID, because still RFID for a kind of user participation, because normally RFID is used, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but I've seen both in the United States and in Europe, and here in Denmark, many libraries now have RFID chips for very quick, when you are borrowing materials from the library, you can go out quick from the library, having all your books and etc. registered at the library, and this is done by RFID chips in the material. I know there's been some German research about how to use mobile phones, how to use RFID, how to use Bluetooth technology, location-based technology as such in libraries, but I haven't seen much about it. So I think this will really be an area coming up And I will also ask you, if you find interesting things you would like to share with me, please go into, you can find my email address if you go into the homepage I have here on this website. You can also find my email address, and please, if you have anything you would like to ask or suggest or recommend, please contact me. Yeah.
Maybe a final question here from Betsy. She's curious how
I can
affordable.
see time
Yes,
is
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. How affordable? What?
The new near
What did you
field.
say, Steve?
She's wondering how affordable the new near field communication coming in newer Android phones will be.
I don't know these applications actually. What does near field communication mean?
I'm not sure either. And Betsy, we're probably close to finishing up here, so if that's something that you could address to him directly through email, that would be great.
Yeah. But I think I will end this session also in order to let you have time to go to other sessions. So I think I will thank you very much again. This has really been a very interesting experience to me. Also talking about, I'm being used to addressing people in physical conference spaces. So this is a new experience to me, also being in a digital conference. But I want to thank you everyone again for your attention and for your questions and comments. So I hope you will enjoy the conference, and thanks to Steve for helping in this session. Have a nice conference. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thanks everybody for attending. I'm going to turn off the recording now, and we'll need you to leave the room in order for the recording to process, and hope that you'll consider attending another session.